Um, I also want to take this moment to urge you to visit our website and join our listserv if you're not already a part of it, to get more information about the issues we'll be discussing today, and to be in touch also about your work. We're always eager to hear about what's happening around the country. In the first two webinars in this series, we looked at the state policies and protocols needed to implement the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. Those webinars are available on the Legal Center webpage, as well as on the Juvenile Law Center webpage. Today we're going to take a closer look at why we need information sharing, what information can be shared, and how information sharing can shape practice. This webinar will also be recorded and posted to our website and the Legal Center website. I am not going to go into detail on speaker bios. I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves when they speak. But let me just note that we're really lucky to have some great experts joining us from around the country who have done really innovative work to improve data sharing and child welfare practices. So great practices happening around the country, really thoughtful research, and we're lucky to be joined by some of the key experts doing this work. You'll be hearing today from Maura McInerney at the Education Law Center, from Sarah Zlotnick at Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania Policy Lab, from Elaine Fink at the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio, and from Michelle Lustig at San Diego County Office of Education. I just want to highlight a couple of technical features before we get started. You'll notice the GoToWebinar control panel at the top right of your screen. It should have automatically collapsed into a small rectangle so you can see the full screen. If it didn't automatically collapse and you'd like to collapse it, you can click on the orange arrow to do so. And if you'd like to type in a question during the webinar, you'll see in that panel, click on the orange arrow to expand it, and you'll see in the control panel a questions area at the bottom. So if we have time at the end, we will definitely take some questions. If we run out of time, we will do our best to get back to folks with email responses. In any case, we're very eager to hear your questions and comments as we go. I want to start with a few quick poll questions to get a sense of who is on the phone. So I'm going to ask Megan if you can pull up our first poll. So this first question here, you just have to click on it to answer, but what's your affiliation? Who do you work with primarily? Child welfare, education, courts and attorneys, or other? So I'll just take a minute while folks answer the question, and then we'll display the response. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of child welfare folks, also a significant number of courts and attorneys, substantial but somewhat less education folks. Actually, it's good to see so many education folks on the line. And then in the other category, and feel free to chat into the question area if you are in the other category, what area of work you do, just so that we have a sense of who's on the phone. Great, thanks for your responses. We'll move on to our next poll question, which we're wondering, have you been engaged in information sharing to help in individual use in the child welfare system? So if you're an educator, you may have been releasing education records to a child welfare worker, a child welfare system. If you're on the child welfare side, you would have been receiving education records to assist you in your case planning. So we'll just take a minute for folks to answer this one. Great. So it looks like a lot of folks, 71% have done at least some information sharing to help in individual use in the system. And we'll go to our final question, which is, have you ever been involved in a system-wide project to share education information with the child welfare system? So maybe that you're working either in an education agency, a child welfare agency, could be at a local or district level or a state level, but in some way worked on a system level information sharing project between education and child welfare. Okay, good. Still a substantial number of people on the phone have been involved in system-wide projects to share information. So based on this information, it sounds like a lot of folks are already doing a significant amount of information sharing, and hopefully the information that you hear over the course of this webinar will help you to refine the work that you are doing. For those who aren't doing any yet, hopefully it will trigger some ideas for the type of information share you can do, why it's important, and what you can get out of it. So with that, I will turn it over to Maura McInerney from the Education Law Center.
Thanks very much, Jessica, and thank you to everyone for being on the call today. I think we're really excited about the panelists and the speakers who are really going to share some models of information practices and what they've done, how they've done it in a very short hour, and really what it's meant in terms of shaping policy and practice. So as Jessica mentioned, we are from the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. Sorry, I'm trying to click to the next screen and I'm having difficulty. That's a, I apologize, a collaboration of the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law, KC Family Programs, NEE KC Foundation, Juvenile Law Center, and the Education Law Center. And it's a National Technical Assistance Resource Center, clearinghouse. We collect a lot of important policies and practices. We have a very good database if folks are interested in searching, joining our listserv, and we encourage you to do so and to learn more about information sharing specifically that's covered on the website. So today's webinar is going to talk a little bit about the need to share information, where that's coming from, how information sharing is shaping policies, improving practices, how it can be accomplished, and really how the Uninterrupted Scholars Act is supporting and facilitating greater information sharing. And we're hoping that these models that we'll be sharing today will be provide you with some examples of how it can be accomplished in your particular jurisdiction. So just to highlight, to take a step back, the importance of information sharing, it's really an opportunity at a system level to identify what's going on, what the barriers to educational success are, to ensure that we have the information we need to make school stability decisions. It also goes to issues of co-ownership of improving educational outcomes for children in the foster care system. And it's an opportunity to leverage the resources of both systems by integrating data. And you're going to be hearing these themes with our panelists today. And we're going to learn about how the data, the information has really changed practice and how it's utilized and how systems are using the information. And is particularly at a systems level to sort of build common goals and effective strategies for both systems. So as we're listening today to the speakers to think about data information that could be shared in your jurisdictions, to think about these issues of attendance and school history, making decisions around school stability, academic performance, etc. And also to consider how the information, the methodology of sharing the information. Is the information coming from the education system and pre-populating into the child welfare system, or is it a one-time sort of joint research project, or is the information coming from the child welfare system to education, and what way is that being accomplished? And also to listen for common data systems that are being built between child welfare and education to ensure that interoperability. And I wanted to share, before we go on to the next panelist, sort of some other models and give you some resources that you may want to look at. Very, very recently, California engaged in a statewide information sharing project, really unprecedented. They shared information between education and child welfare. They looked at the data of over 43,000 children with an episode in foster care during a single school year. They learned so much in doing so about where students were attending school, high rates of school mobility. It reflected low levels of academic achievement and graduation rates, and particularly they compared children in the foster care system to other at-risk groups in terms of children of poverty, etc. And what's really encouraging too is what they're doing with that information. They're identifying targeted areas of focus where they can improve educational outcomes and really taking an in-depth look at the interface between foster care experiences of students and their educational outcomes. How is a particular type of living placement impacting educational outcomes, and looking at length of stay? So I encourage everyone to go to those websites, the Stewart Foundation website in particular, who did a terrific job with this, and also CFTL, to look at those websites and to really download that very, very recent study of the invisible achievement gap. It's really a terrific report. And then the last one I wanted to share was Allegheny County, a local jurisdiction, where Allegheny County's Department of Human Services is sharing information with Pittsburgh Public Schools as well as other school districts, and they're doing it on a real-time basis, on daily and weekly information sharing, where information comes from the school district and is sent to a DHS warehouse. And they're getting GPAs, they're getting attendance, suspension, standardized test scores, etc. They're able to upload the IEP, all of that information is shared. And they're able to look at the school stability issue by grade. They're looking at attendance, GPAs, reading and math proficiency, and school discipline issues as well. And then to look at how they're utilizing that information. They have a child welfare education screen that's being pre-populated with this information. They have a mechanism that they're building to look at attendance alert. If a child has had, a few unexcused absences, 3 or more, to ensure that the child welfare caseworker level person knows about that. Looking at how after-school programs that target children in foster care. So I encourage you to look at their website as well, where they have their reports and resources online, and they're another example of information sharing that folks can look at. And finally, that's my contact information. We're really encouraged by the number of folks who responded that they're already engaging in this kind of information sharing. We'd really love to learn more about what you're doing in your jurisdiction, how it's making a difference, and to share that as a model through the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Maura. And I'm going to just briefly introduce Sarah Zlotnick, who's at the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania Policy Lab and has been involved in some really great research studies. So take it away, Sarah.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessica and Maura. I want to thank the Legal Center on Foster Care and Education for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Jessica said, my name is Sarah Zlotnick. I'm a senior strategist at Policy Lab at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I lead our child welfare and behavioral health portfolios. My background is in public health and social work, and I worked in therapeutic foster care for a number of years before moving into research and policy. Policy Lab is an interdisciplinary research center made up of pediatric clinicians and public health and legal researchers committed to evidence to action. As part of our evidence to action mission, we work to share our research with policymakers and agency administrators so it can inform programs and policies and improve health outcomes for children. Today, I'm going to be speaking with you about Policy Lab's research on the educational experiences of children in foster care. I hope that by sharing our research, it can help us all better understand the educational needs of children in foster care and the opportunities for action opened up by the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. And I'm very excited that there's both folks on education, child welfare, and across systems for today's conversation. In this talk, I'm going to be sharing findings from a recent Policy Lab brief, Improving Education Outcomes for Children in Child Welfare, which is pictured on this slide. The brief is available on Policy Lab's website, policylab.us, and all the links are at the end of this presentation. In the presentation, I'm going to review findings from Policy Lab's research related to absences, school changes, and challenges to cross-system collaboration. Second, I will identify recommendations to strengthen educational success for youth and child welfare. My hope is that this presentation will demonstrate the need for greater cross-system collaboration and set the stage for the important work underway in San Diego, Cincinnati, and your jurisdiction. So specifically, I'm going to be talking about findings from the Children's Stability and Wellbeing Study, or CSF. The study was led by Policy Lab co-director, Dr. David Rubin, and was funded by the William Penn Foundation, the Stoneleigh Foundation, and the National Institute for Child Health and Development. The study had two main components that I'll be talking about. First, a quantitative longitudinal analysis where we followed children ages 3 to 8 entering a new foster care placement for a period of 2 years. During the 2 years, we interviewed the caregiver and the caseworker every 6 months or every time the child changed homes to better understand system factors that contribute to placement stability and improve child outcomes. The second component of CSF were qualitative focus groups, where we conducted 10 focus groups with teachers, school counselors, foster parents, and caseworkers to understand what was happening on the ground between education and child welfare systems that helped or hindered youth educational success. So the first finding we're going to look at together is attendance. So overall, the absence rate for children in foster care was 25 days, or over 5 weeks of school year. This is compared with a school district average of 12 days, which is the dotted line that you see on the graph. This high rate of absences is alarming, as we know when children miss significant instructional time, it impacts academic outcomes and increases grade retention. So now let's take a look at attendance by placement stability. So first I'm going to define placement stability for you, and then we'll return to this graph. Placement stability looks at whether the child is remaining in the same home or moving from home to home. We know that from our research and from others' research prior, that if children enter a secure placement early, they have better behavioral health and education outcomes. Specifically for this analysis, we looked at 3 categories of placement stability as well as reunification. First, children who are early stable may change homes in the first 45 days, but do not change homes after that. Children who are late stabilize in a home between 45 days and 9 months. Children who are unstable are those children who continue to move from home to home beyond 9 months. And last, we looked at children who are in a unified home, and that could be reunification any time during the 2-year period. So now let's return to our graph. So as we look at absences by youth placement experience, we see that if children are early stable, they have fewer absences, much closer to the school district average. For children who continue to change homes in late or unstable placements, they have greater absences. And that the highest rate of absences were children who are in unified home. And this was both for children while they were in placement, as well as higher absence rates upon reunifying. So what is driving the attendance numbers, you might ask? From this pie chart, you can see that the largest reasons for poor attendance is absences. It's not suspensions due to behavior, nor gaps in enrollment. So 83% of days out of school was because of absences. And now let's take a third look at absences and examine what children's attendance looks like before entry into foster care. So let me orient you to this graph. The middle of the graph shows the child's first day of placement. So you can see where the cursor is, right at the center. The orange line to the left shows you their attendance rate before entry into foster care. The yellow line to the right is their attendance after entry into foster care. You can see from the spike in the center that half the children are absent the day after placement. And then for the orange line, prior to placement, the average days out of school exceeds 30. And then once they enter placement, the average is lower, but still very high at 25. So to Policy Lab, this graph highlights a critical challenge in addressing the educational needs of youth, and that the educational difficulties experienced by children in foster care typically precede their placement in care. Therefore, to support youth educational success, we have to promote and secure their success for all children in child welfare, particularly for those remaining in home, along with our work looking at the issue for children in foster care. So with all that, we're going to change gears, and we're going to take a look at our second outcome. We're going to look at school changes, which we know was a big focus of the Fostering Connections Act in promoting school stability. So for youth in our study, the average number of schools attended was 2.7 schools over 2 years. Similarly, for what we saw for attendance, youth who are early stable have fewer school changes than youth continue to change from home to home. So they had an average of 1.7 schools. For children who are unstable, they had higher rates of school changes, an average of 3.6 schools over 2 years. And we want to just have you remember that these are for children that are kindergarten, first, second, and third graders. These are our youngest students in their early experiences in school. So last, we want to take a look at the CSF qualitative focus group data, examining collaboration between education and child welfare and meeting youth education success. I'm going to highlight a few of the core themes and show you some of the quotes. We're not going to walk through all the quotes, but they'll all be available following the presentation, so you can look at them in further detail. So the first theme I want to highlight from the focus groups was confusion about policies. There was inconsistent knowledge of formal policies, for example, knowing McKinney-Vento or Fostering Connections, as well as state and local rules. There was also inconsistent implementation of policies. This was between individuals, between schools, and between the child welfare and education systems. This gap in policies and confusion about policies was particularly apparent regarding disclosure of information about behavioral health services, knowing which agency or person was responsible for ensuring the educational needs of children in foster care, and in determining the protocol for transportation to school when a child changed foster placement. For example, an agency caseworker shared, and you can see the quote on the right, "But you know, they want us to do everything, but yet you call the school and they're like, well, you're not authorized to get this information." As you can see from this quote, the caseworker wasn't provided information they needed to do their job. Hopefully this is an area that can now be addressed through greater clarification of what can be shared with whom enabled under the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. The second theme highlighted by the focus groups was ineffective cross-system communication. There was frequent uncertainty about a school's duty to share information and a caseworker's right to receive it, and vice versa for child welfare workers sharing information with education personnel. Also, the poor quality of communication was a source of recurrent frustration for all stakeholders across the system. Consequently, focus group participants in education and child welfare said there was often reactive partnering post-crisis rather than proactive teaming, as emphasized in this comment by a caseworker. This is the comment, this is our bubble at top. You go to the school to get a transfer or to see how the kid is doing in school, and they're like, "Did you not know she hasn't been in school for X amount of days? Did you not know that they're failing? So why are you telling me that now? What happened before?" We also want to highlight a comment by a teacher about teachers frequently talking about having insufficient information and background on the children to best meet their educational needs. So this teacher shared on the right, "I had an individual in my room and I wasn't aware what he received, that he was part of the special ed process because that information never came over." So in sharing the findings from the qualitative and quantitative CSAT study with policymakers, teachers, caseworkers, and agency staff in child welfare and education here in Philadelphia, as well as more broadly, our conversations identified 3 opportunities for action that we want to relay to you today, all bolstered by the Fostering Connections Act and the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. The first opportunity, promote real-time comprehensive data sharing among child welfare, education, and behavioral health. This data sharing can be both at the child level and population level. Examples include joint expectations of what can be shared between agencies with whom, facilitated by shared databases and memorandums of understanding, as some of the work that Maura highlighted earlier in California and in Allegheny. Second, systematically track and respond to absences, suspensions, and behavioral health issues. This can include child welfare and or education regularly tracking absenteeism, creating red flags to notify child welfare and education when there's a problem, and developing shared protocols about how to respond. Last, the opportunity for action. Integrate service delivery between child welfare, education, and behavioral health. Examples may include co-locating staff, coordinating screening and assessment, and greater resource sharing. So here's Philadelphia, and we are so pleased that we've been fortunate to continue to work with our partners across education and child welfare here in the city. And so in parallel with the release of the Seesaw findings, there's been enormous work underway in Philadelphia to address each of these three areas across systems. In particular, I want to highlight two of the pieces. Philadelphia has increased its data sharing between education and child welfare at the population level. It's looking at youth across the educational span with child welfare involvement. And the city is growing its use of this information to understand the educational experiences and identify areas for intervention. Second, Philadelphia has expanded its integrated service delivery between child welfare and education, growing the work of its the Department of Human Services Educational Support Center. So in closing, I want to thank our many Seesaw partners who made this work possible, particularly our partners at the city and the Department of Human Services, the Department of Behavioral Health, and the School District of Philadelphia, as well as the many people from the Seesaw study team who made this work possible. Last, I want to close with information for more resources, the work that I was speaking about today. To access the brief, as well as some prior briefs and related publications, all the links are available here, as well as to follow up about Policy Lab's child welfare and broader health work. Hopefully this presentation provided you with background about the need to better support the educational success of children in child welfare. In addition, I hope this set us up to explore opportunities for action enabled by the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. So thank you, and I'm very excited to hear about the work underway in San Diego and Cincinnati.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a great presentation. It was particularly good to hear about the detailed information that you can get through careful information sharing and research, and as well as some of the key gaps in information sharing that predated the Uninterrupted Scholars Act and that are starting to turn around now here in Philadelphia and other places. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Elaine Fink. I'll let her introduce herself further. But I will note that some of the challenges that Sarah raised in some of those bubble comments are precisely the types of things that the work Elaine is doing is addressing. So Elaine, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Jessica. I am Elaine Fink, and I'm the Managing Attorney for Education and Children's Advocacy at the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio, which is based in Cincinnati. Whoops. Sorry about that. If you were a student in foster care who attended Cincinnati Public Schools in the last few years and you were proposed for expulsion, I can tell you that you were not put out of school. If you were a student in foster care and you were in your senior year in Cincinnati Public Schools in the last several years, you earned your high school diploma. These are among the exciting outcomes that are documented by the data we've collected as part of Kids in School Rule. I'm going to talk with you today about data sharing and building our data infrastructure as a component of Kids in School Rule. First, though, some background information to give you some context. Sorry about this. Okay. The partners to our program are the Child Welfare Agency, which is the Hamilton County Department of Job and Family Services, Cincinnati Public Schools, the Hamilton County Juvenile Court, and my office, the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio. The target population of students are kindergarten through 12th grade students who attend Cincinnati Public, who are in custody of the county. And actually, about a year and a half ago, we expanded the program to include some students with a different custody status of protective supervision. So if they had been in the program and they returned to a family member and stayed within Cincinnati Public Schools, they are within Kids in School rule. We started our program with a detailed memorandum of understanding among the 4 partners that provided for comprehensive information sharing that was necessary to accomplish all the program goals. And actually that took us a long way, and just in the last year we have created a standalone data sharing agreement that is specifically targets all the data sharing that we wanted to go on. We did that in part for replication, and of course now we have the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, so some of those needs have shifted even since we created our specific data sharing agreement. I want to give you a little bit of limited information about Cincinnati Public Schools and the Child Welfare Agency that are the partners here. So there's 33,000 students in Cincinnati Public, and about 250 of them at any time are in foster care. About 1,800 children are in care of the county, and just over 60% are school-aged. The race and income demographics are about the same for each system. 76% are children of color and 70% are low income. It is a comprehensive program, Kids in School Rule, and it's been in place for over 5 years. Just to give you a few keystone, we have a Cincinnati Public School liaison in each school. So that's a Cincinnati public person who is responsible for the education well-being, we'll say, of all the youth in foster care in this program. And so if there's a discipline problem, an academic problem, if there's anything, those liaisons, one in each school, are identified as the go-to person. They are also expected to meet periodically with all Kids in School Rule students on an individual basis. The Child Welfare Agency has 2 dedicated education specialists for Kids in School Rule. Now these are in addition to the caseworkers who are already involved and working with the students in the program, but the Child Welfare Education Specialists become the most informed about the students in the program. Their numbers are plastered around the school. The front desk receptionist, the principal, other administrators, of course the liaison, the school psychologists, all know how to reach the education specialist, because rather than reach out to a caseworker that might change from time to time, they reach out to the education specialist. Other key program components are the education court report we've created, which is prepared and submitted by the child welfare folks to juvenile court each time a student in this program has a review hearing in court. So the education report addresses all kinds of education information, and then our judicial bench card for education success is aligned so that a magistrate can quickly look at the education court report and follow up on questions or concerns from the present time or from the past review hearing through the judicial bench card. Legal aid does regular advocacy for students in this program, especially when they are proposed for expulsion or through related to special education. We struggled trying to design a data infrastructure to house our program data. We presumed at the outset that the data should be kept by the Child Welfare Agency, but that didn't actually end up working out. And I'm going to skip all the fits and starts and frustrations we went through, but I'm sharing with you this Dilbert cartoon because based on the number of you that have also participated in some data and information sharing based on the poll Jessica did at the beginning, I'm guessing maybe you can relate to the sense of humor we had to maintain as we launched into our data sharing. We wanted to collect data that would be susceptible to analysis, that could be compared and quantified, and that frankly would help us tweak and improve the Kids in School Rule program. We wanted to use the data to monitor individual students and to get a picture of the Kids in School Rule students in the aggregate. And we wanted to use data to support identification of systemic problems and establish priorities. We discovered the Learning Partner Dashboard. Learning Partner Dashboard is a data infrastructure that had already been designed by Cincinnati Public Schools, and they maintain it. I'm showing you a sample of data points that are in the Learning Partner Dashboard. Now this is just a sample. We actually have 65 data points. 52 education elements are populated on a daily basis from the Cincinnati Public Data Warehouse, they call it. So we customized for this program 52 education data points that we wanted to be in the component for Kids in School Rule of the dashboard. And then we picked 13 child welfare elements that the Child Welfare Agency exports weekly to the Learning Partner Dashboard. So the education data is up to date daily. The child welfare information is weekly. The dashboard provides a structure and simultaneously allows us to retain flexibility, which has been really useful. And the potential and promise has turned out to be tremendous. We can isolate individual student data and we can aggregate Kids in School Rule data. We can separate out school data or integrate it with child welfare data elements. And as you can imagine, we can generate reports quarterly, annually, or on whatever basis we choose. For individual students, the report addresses, I'm happy to say, some of the information that Sarah said in her research we should be looking at. Well, we are looking at the kinds of factors listed here, and we especially have a regular eye on attendance and discipline removals and that kind of thing. And so we are able to look at individual students. We have a color system to identify students at risk. So we have green, yellow, and orange flags for individual students so that the education specialist from the Child Welfare Agency can quickly look at the Learning Partner Dashboard and get an idea of if there are risk factors or if there are multiple risk factors, what's going on with the student. We also look at aggregate data, and we are able to distill based on custody status, does attendance change, or how many placement changes connected to custody status or mobility. And this is some of the flexibility that we get through Learning Partner Dashboard. Of course, it's not all a bed of roses. There have been challenges and there remain challenges. For one, of course, the quality of the reports is dependent on the accuracy of data going in, and sometimes there's problems with that. And we are discovering, the partners are, that we need additional resources to support ongoing analysis of data. Here's an example of some great news we were able to find coming out of LPD, that a child whose home placement changed 3 times was actually maintained in the same school throughout that period, and we were all extremely excited about that. Other example, when I referenced at the beginning of my presentation that if you had been in this program you would have graduated from high school, that's because we were thrilled to find out that in 2012, 12 out of 12 high school seniors got their diplomas, and the same thing in 2013, 15 out of 15 high school seniors got their diplomas either in May or by the end of summer school at the end of the summer. So we are extremely excited about that. It's actually a higher graduation rate than Cincinnati Public has for students in general. So we're pleased that with the impact of our interventions. Most Kids in School rural students remained actually in one school throughout the school year. A handful had 2 school placements and one had 3. We had typically had enrollment issues, and we were very pleased to find out through our data that for the last 2 beginning of school year, every Kid in School rural student began school on the first day of the academic year. There were no undue delays. And then lastly, the discipline. No kid has been expelled who's in this program in the last few years. Legal aid does represent every one of these students at an expulsion hearing if it goes that far. Sometimes, though, Cincinnati Public Schools has been very willing to work with us and keep the student in school and move to improved services instead of school removal. In addition to all those kind of student outcomes, we also can say that our data has supported and expanded system change efforts in each system. So we are confident that going forward, the data will continue to drive additional system changes, and I just want to share a few. One is that Cincinnati Public stands out with its no barrier enrollment protocol that they've created, and here it is. It is basically, my version of this is enroll now, ask questions later if the child is in foster care. This has actually garnered a lot of attention around our region and in our state, and I think it'd be good for all of us if other school districts adopted such a protocol. But in addition, school fees are automatically waived now for kids in foster care and custody of the county, and they always were able to be waived, but caseworkers had to fill out paperwork on individual students, so it was very time-consuming. Now, with the click of a button, once the school district knows the children are in custody of the county, their fees are waived. We have the Power School, which is the electronic data for parents and custodial agency to look at, and we have student and class profiles that identify for everyone that this child is a student in Kids in School Rule, and will raise academic or behavioral or at-risk concerns if needed. I would give Cincinnati Public Schools credit by saying that the spirit has permeated the district, that there is an expectation that folks will go the extra mile to keep a Kid in School Rule student in school. Similarly, there are systemic changes at the Child Welfare Agency. They are looking at education stability as a factor in placement decisions, as they should, and they now are. They used to remove students during the school day for discretionary case plan services. That is no longer happening, and caseworkers are much better trained on education law, which is a win-win for everyone. At the juvenile court, there are also systemic changes. Magistrates know a lot more about education law, and as I mentioned, they are able to focus on academic success and school stability and engage the student in school planning at juvenile court hearings. We all know in the end it's not only about statistical data, but it's also about people. So I wanted to share this testimonial of a Kid in School Rule student who was a junior. I don't need to read it to you, but she was really excited with the support and success that the various stakeholders in Kids in School Rule were able to provide for her. And with that, I thank you, and I will turn it back to Jessica.
Great. Thanks so much, Elaine. That was really exciting to hear about the changes that can happen when we pay careful attention to the education issues and when we catch them right as they're arising, especially like the testimonial at the end. A couple of people have chatted in to ask about whether the PowerPoint will be available after the presentation, and the answer is yes. It will be posted both on the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education website as well as on the Juvenile Law Center website. The PowerPoint will be available and the recording of this session. So thanks for the questions, and feel free to keep chatting them in. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Lustig, who's been working on these issues and can give us some more detailed information about what can happen, how we can set up strong information sharing practices, and what positive outcomes we can get from them. Schultz, over to you. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and really enjoy talking about this issue and the work that we've done. I do want to just start by saying that in California since 2004, students in foster care have enjoyed a whole array of entitlements, many of which mirror those entitlements that students who are homeless have under McKinney-Vento. So issues like immediate enrollment and a lot of other privileges are afforded them, and that really lays the groundwork for much of what we've done throughout the state. I oversee the Foster Youth Services grant for the San Diego County Office of Education, and that is a state-funded grant through our Department of Education that is really allowing us to do and requiring us to do a lot of cross-system collaboration and interagency work to ensure that the needs of the student population are met by all of the stakeholders, whether that be child welfare or whoever is the educational decision maker of the child, the probation department, the courts, our minors attorneys, and public education. So I want to just start with the relationship between data sharing and educational outcomes. I think what you've heard already is that when we are talking to each other about these topics, about individual students and what their needs are, and more globally what an at-risk student population needs, we begin to come to the middle together, and we have an opportunity to collaborate differently, cooperate differently, and understand each other differently so that we understand what each responsibility is and how we can complement each other instead of working at odds with one another. Those outcomes you've already heard from the prior two presenters, so I won't belabor them here, but you will see increases in achievement and graduation rates, and most specifically school stability when, in particular, the placing agency can be thinking about placement changes, the timing of those changes, and the actual placement changes in relationship to a child's academic school year. Historically, that isn't necessarily something that happened. I spent many years as a child welfare worker and really had never received any information or education about why I should be considering that, and I began to do that as I became a parent and was thinking about that for my own children. So it was more coincidental than intentional at that point. Since 2006, the San Diego County has had a foster youth student information system that we created in-house. We built from scratch. Under the governance of an advisory group that was chaired by our juvenile court presiding judge and involved stakeholders from child welfare, probation, juvenile court, and public education, and created what was essentially an agreement and contracts and MOUs that allowed for the county office to host a secure data warehouse and to have all of our stakeholders contribute data to that warehouse so that it was accessible and viewable by those that had the legal right to see those different data pieces. We are responsible for ensuring that the access is, that the database is secure, that the filters are appropriate, so that the folks who are only able to see what they are, as I said, entitled to see. Each user group actually has a unique set of screens that only has the information that they need. And there is significant restrictions to what data is seen by different people and different stakeholder groups. We have as robust as possible security features and firewalls. Our entire process goes through an FTP process, which may be more technical than this group wants, but essentially we are running data match files every day. We run about 500,000 match files a day for all of our school districts and against all of our children in care and those on probation. We receive into FISIS weekly feeds from both child welfare and the Department of Probation. Those feeds essentially create the match file that we are then matching against our 42 school districts. We receive a daily feed from juvenile court, and we use that feed as basically a cleaning mechanism. That feed allows us to make sure that the children who we will be matching against our school districts have actually disposed to out-of-home care. In other words, they have a true finding. They haven't just been detained by child welfare or probation. They actually have entered the formal foster care system. And so that additional feed really helps us to do that. And the slide says nearly all 42 school districts because, as I think Elaine just said, there are issues with data and issues with where you get data and how you get data. Nearly all of our 42 school districts have unique student information systems. They change student information systems, sometimes without telling anyone. And so we have to write new scripts and create new files and get those files up and running and automated. And we have districts that go on and off of our system, unfortunately, more frequently than we'd like. But we are, so it's always this work in progress, and we're always trying to get everybody on at the same time, and I will be the first to admit that has never happened. So we just lost 2 districts we had on last year because of some new systems they have, and we're working to get those guys back on. We do have administrator roles for each of our partner groups. So whoever is a stakeholder group, whether it's an individual school district, the Child Welfare Authority, Minors Council, each of those entities has to have a person appointed who is the administrator. And their responsibilities are pretty significant. That administrator needs to authorize an account to be opened and has the responsibility to immediately tell us if that account needs to be closed, because our database is web-based and can be accessed from anywhere. And the user group permissions were defined by our advisory group, and they determine who sees what. So there's certain information that is in our database. It's contained here on your slide. It is all of the information that we feel the different stakeholder groups really need, and it doesn't contain anything that we felt this database should not provide. So there's much information that the different stakeholder groups absolutely have the right to know. They just didn't necessarily need to have it from this database. So we were very conservative about what we shared and how we shared it. We had been in the process of building a few screens around statewide testing. We had gotten through about 6 different grades for those testing when we learned that we would be moving to a new statewide assessment, and so we halted that procedure. And then we are very specific about what our database does not contain. It does not contain why the child entered foster care, any information about their family of origin, their siblings, their psychiatric diagnosis, information that might be confidential or protected and should otherwise not be shared. We do not contain special education information in our database at the present time due to technological issues as well as some logistical and legal issues. Special ed records are required to be kept in a separate place within a child's CUME file, and we haven't come up with a mechanism to keep them in a separate place within this database yet, and to figure out how to allow the access that would be authorized for that. In addition, many of our school districts are still doing handwritten IEPs that are not in an electronic system, and it makes it hard to get that data in. We currently do not have discipline information, and as I said, we're in the process of getting those state standardized test scores and had to halt that as we're waiting for the Smarter Balance tests to come online and look at what those will look like so we can figure out how to contain them. Our authorized user groups are listed here. Essentially, it's our judges. The court clerks within the courtrooms are actually the only ones hand entering into our database. They enter information about who holds ed rights, and you can see the other folks who have access. School police officers only have access to the probation side of our database. They do not have access to the foster care side. And then this is just a checklist for you. I do understand the PowerPoint will be up. So it just shows you, you'll be able to go back and see this should you have a curiosity, who can see what and what their access is. All of that, again, was driven by the advisory committee. The county office's position is that although we own and host this database, we do not own any of the data in it. The parties that contribute that data continue to own that data, and they would be able to, they're the ones that dictated to us who could see what, and we believe that was their authority to do so. So just some considerations that we learned. We really recommend that you begin with the end in mind. What exactly is it that you're hoping to accomplish? What do you want your database to do? We designed this for disaggregated student-level data. We wanted social workers to be able to get in, see how their kids were doing in school. We wanted schools to be able to see who held ed rights and who the social worker and attorney was. We wanted things to be very accessible. We didn't build it for aggregate research purposes or anything else. It's incredibly important that everybody be engaged from the very beginning about what you hope to attend and why, and that you have an agreement. We did this pre the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. We had an understanding countywide that child welfare was acting in place of the parents, that they needed information, that schools needed to know who children in foster care were so that they could fulfill their obligations and mandates in education code to provide special entitlements to the student population. And so we came together and understood that we had to create an opportunity to do this. We at the time had about 8,000 children in foster care in San Diego County alone, and it just could not be done by pen and paper. It had to be done electronically. And then we had to take into consideration what the young people thought, what the students said. They really had concerns about who would know what about them, and we had to be very explicit and have them contribute to what that would look like. And then really look at the best way to meet all of the demands and mandates and restrictions around confidentiality and data sharing, and come up with that sort of universal understanding. Additional considerations of who's responsible for maintaining the database, who, as I said, who owns the data, and who owns the intellectual property of the physical database. Have that up front in the beginning so that all parties that are contributing to the database, maintaining the database, have a very clear understanding of what their obligations are and also how this will roll out moving forward. For instance, we do get requests for data from the database for any number of things, whether it's to back up a piece of legislation or some other issue. And we go back to that advisory and say, here's a request for data from FISIS. Does everybody agree that we can pull this data out? It's a database. We can do that. We can do lots of data runs and data reports, and we have built a data dashboard from this that even pulls more detailed information out, but we always go back to that advisory and ask if everyone is on board and in agreement that we move forward, and if they're not, we don't. So that's a very quick overview of what we do. I hope it provided just one example of how we have tackled this issue, and I do want to say that my colleagues across the state are doing this in different ways and similar ways, and I believe close to 28 counties in California out of 58 do have some type of robust data sharing that is happening, and much of that is happening to benefit students in foster care. So I thank you for your time and wish you well.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was excellent information, and I really want to give an enthusiastic thank you to all of our panelists who gave us an incredible amount of information in a very short amount of time. We know that we just sort of got the tip of the iceberg with this. We wanted to get ideas out there and circulating to continue the conversation that a lot of folks are having around the country on these issues. We obviously are not going to have time to take the questions right now, so we will try to get an email out to the entire group responding to some of the questions that we have received. But if you have follow-up questions, also feel free to reach out to us. You see the contact information here. You can also go straight to the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education by emailing ccleducation@americanbar.org. So thanks to everyone for your contributions as panelists and for participating in this webinar, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and hearing about the great projects that are happening around the country.